Hello, my name's Nick Holland. I'm a Bronte biographer, and in today's House of Brontë episode, we're looking at a joyous occasion in the Bronte story, a triple wedding. All too often, the Bronte story has tragic elements. They all died far too young, depriving us of many more great novels and depriving them of you know, their adult lives, really. So there's lots of tragedy in the Bronte stories, but there are lots of moments of happiness too. So we look at the House of Bronte story. Right at the beginning, the formation of this House of Bronte, there's a very joyous element, and its anniversary is today, the 29th of December. We're all getting ready for New Year. You might have your resolutions ready, you might have some special events coming up in 2025. On 29th of December 1812, there's a special event going on in what was then called the West Riding of Yorkshire, what we'd call West Yorkshire today, in Guiseley, between Leeds and Bradford. There was a double wedding, and then 400 miles to the south, there was another wedding connected, a triple wedding, and we'll come to that. And it's especially interesting to us because this was the wedding of Patrick and Maria, who became the parents of the Bronte sisters and of Branwell Bronte and of 6 Bronte siblings. So, how did this happen? Because the Brontes, of course, are queens of Yorkshire, but their roots are Celtic roots. We've got Irish, Northern Irish father Patrick, Cornish mother Maria. How did they come together in Yorkshire on this day in 1812? We'll start with Patrick Bronte. He grew up in County Down. He's a very gifted child from a poor farming background. Because he was so gifted, the local priest employed Patrick as a teacher from a young age, and then arranged for Patrick to go to Cambridge, the University of Cambridge in England, St John's College. He did a degree in divinity and became a Church of England priest, and that changed his life. It gave him a career path away from farming, and he became a vicar, a reverend. Now, after graduating, he practiced in Essex and then in Shrewsbury, near Shropshire. 1809, he took up a new parish, Dewsbury, in the West Riding of Yorkshire. So 1809, December 1809, Patrick Bronte arrives in Yorkshire. He didn't know anything at that point of the Branwell family, but he'd come to know them, or at least one of them in particular. The Branwells were from Penzance, right down in the southwest. It's about 400 miles from Penzance to Haworth. So Brussels, where Charlotte and Emily Bronte went to, is actually closer to Haworth as the crow flies than Penzance is. So Maria Bronte was one of a large, Maria Branwell as she was called then, was one of a large family of Branwells in Penzance. So they were merchants. Her father was Thomas Branwell, was quite a wealthy merchant. He had lots of property. He owned an inn. He owned warehouses on the docks, and he was a successful merchant, and his family were living a good life in the warm, hospitable climate of Penzance. So in 1812, why did Maria Branwell leave that behind? Well, her parents had died a year earlier, and she was looking to she got an annuity, but she was looking to make a way for herself in life. She believed she could strike out and make a life for herself. She was a very religious woman, and she heard about a school that had been formed in Woodhouse Grove near Leeds. Because it was being run by her aunt and uncle, the Fennells, John Fennell and his wife Jane Fennell. Now, Jane had been a sister of Thomas Branwell. She was Maria Branwell's aunt. They'd formed a school, a Methodist school, really, which was a growing part of the Church of England at the time. And they needed somebody to help at the school. Their own daughter, another Jane Fennell, was already there helping. But they knew that Maria Branwell in Penzance was a very capable young woman, and they asked her if she'd travel to Yorkshire to help them initially with the admin of the school. Maybe it was expected she'd become a teacher later. But in 1812, in the summer, around July time, Maria Branwell made the long, potentially dangerous journey from Penzance to Yorkshire. People used to write wills before making journeys as long as that in those times. But she managed the journey successfully, and she arrived in West Yorkshire in the summer of 1812. And when she was there, she found another person who'd made a long journey. Because Patrick Bronte had arrived at the school around the same time. Because Patrick Bronte, he'd never met Maria before, but he did know John Fennell, because John Fennell had been in Shropshire, and he'd met him while he was an assistant curate in Shropshire. So Fennell needed somebody to help with the classics examinations at his school, Latin and Greek. And he remembered Patrick Bronte, remembered that he was very adept in Latin and Greek, and he thought he'd be perfect to be an examiner at his school. And he knew that Patrick had also arrived in West Yorkshire. He was at Dewsbury, and then he was at Hartshead nearby. So he thought, this man would be perfect. I know him. He could be an examiner. I'll ask him to come and help out at the school. So that's what Patrick Bronte did. And that is how Patrick and Maria met each other in the summer of 1812. They both travelled a long way. Patrick was in his mid-30s by this time. Maria in her late 20s. It was quite late to be getting married in early 19th century terms, but they'd obviously never found the ideal soulmate. But they did. They realised very quickly, I think, that they loved each other and that they wanted to spend their lives together. So much that by December 1812, they were married. Less than half a year after meeting. And we've got some lovely letters from Maria Branwell to Patrick, saying that how much she loves him, basically, and how she wants to spend her life with him. And I'll read one from his great book, Patrick Bronte, Father of Genius, by Dudley Green, a brilliant biography of Patrick. Lots of letters to and from him, including a letter on the 21st of October 1812. That was about 3 months after they first met. They're engaged by this point, Maria and Patrick. And Maria says, "Unless my love for you were very great, how could I so contentedly give up my home and all my friends, a home I love so much that I have often thought nothing could bribe me to renounce it for any great length of time together, and friends with whom I have so long accustomed share all the vicissitudes of joy and sorrow, yet these have lost their weight. And though I cannot always think of them without a sigh, yet the anticipation of sharing with you all the pleasures and pains, the cares and anxieties of life, of contributing to your comfort and becoming the companion of your pilgrimage, is more delightful to me than any other prospect which this world can possibly present." So we see already the depth of Maria's love for Patrick. It was certainly reciprocated. So by late December, they were ready to get married. And they chose to get married at St Oswald's Church in Guiseley, which is still there near Leeds, in between Leeds and Bradford. But it wasn't a straightforward wedding, because it was a doubly happy event. Patrick Bronte and Maria Branwell were getting married. But it was a double ceremony. The same ceremony, William Morgan and Jane Fennell were getting married. Now, William Morgan was Patrick Bronte's best friend. He'd known him in Shropshire. When he came to Yorkshire, he found Morgan had already made the journey up to Yorkshire. They were best friends. Jane Fennell was Jane Fennell the younger, the daughter of the people around the school, Maria Branwell's cousin. So Maria's cousin and Patrick's best friend are also getting married at the same ceremony. Now, some reports have said that John Fennell, the school owner, carried out the marriage ceremonies for both couples, because he later became a a reverend in the Methodist Church himself, but he wasn't at this time. So I believe he probably was the best man or played some role. But the two priests, as we'll see this from a report we have, acted as officiators for each other's weddings. So that was a bit unusual. There were two brides, gave each other away. So a double marriage ceremony. But that's not the end of it, because 400 miles away in Penzance, where Maria Branwell had travelled from, Maria had a younger sister with a name that became familiar to us, first name Charlotte Branwell, her youngest sister. And she also was in a romance at this time with her cousin, Joseph Branwell. So she was keeping the same name because Charlotte Branwell and Joseph Branwell had agreed to get married. And they corresponded with each other, a couple in Penzance and two couples in the West Riding of Yorkshire. And they arranged to have the wedding on the same day, at the same time. So two marriages taking place in Guiseley. There was a marriage taking place in Madron, Penzance in Cornwall. So the two Branwell cousins, Charlotte Branwell and Joseph Branwell. So it was a really joyous day for the Branwell family, for the Bronte family, for the Morgan family, the Fennell family. They were all related, and they all shared in a triple marriage. And we get an account of it in 1884, on Christmas Day 1884. The Cornish newspaper carried a letter from Charlotte Branwell. Now, there's lots of confusion in these names. This wasn't the Charlotte Branwell who just got married to Joseph Branwell in 1812. It was her daughter who took the same name, Charlotte Branwell. And she wrote to the paper and gave an account of this amazing triple wedding. So I'm going to read it now. I'll read from my mobile phone. It's on my blog, annebronte.org. So if you want to find out more about the Bronte story, I do a new post every single week, and I have done for many years. So there's lots of Bronte information on that website. So here we have a Cornish Telegraph, Christmas Day 1884, carried a letter from Charlotte Branwell, the younger. And she explained it was arranged that the two marriages, Patrick and Maria and William and Jane, should be solemnised on the same day as that of Miss Charlotte Branwell's mother, fixed for 29th December in far-off Penzance. And so, whilst the youngest sister of Mrs. Bronte was being married to her cousin, the late Mr. Joseph Branwell, the double marriage, as already noted, was taking place in Yorkshire. Miss Charlotte Branwell also adds that at Guiseley, not only did the Reverend Mr. Bronte and the Reverend Mr. Morgan perform the marriage ceremony for one another, but the brides acted as bridesmaids for each other. Mr. Fennell, who was a clergyman of the Church of England later on, would have united the young people, but he had to give both brides away. Miss Branwell notes these facts to prove that the arrangement for the three marriages on the same day was no caprice or eccentricity on the part of Mr. Bronte, but was made entirely by the brides. She has many a time heard her mother speak of the circumstances. It is but seldom, continues Miss Branwell, that two sisters and four cousins are united in holy matrimony on the same day. Those who were united on that day bore that relationship to each other. Mrs. Bronte, formerly Maria Branwell, and my mother Charlotte Branwell were sisters. My father was their cousin, and Jane Fennell was a cousin to them all, her father, the Reverend J. Fennell, having married a Miss Branwell of a former generation. If the account I have given you is likely to be of any interest, you are quite at liberty to use it as you think proper. I really think a deal of eccentricity had been ascribed to Mr. Bronte, which he never possessed. And from his letters to my dear mother, of which there are many still in existence, I should say he was a very worthy man, but one who had to pass through some great trials. In the early death of a truly amiable wife and of a very gifted family. So that's Charlotte Branwell's account of the marriage of her mother, another Charlotte Branwell. There's also the account of the triple marriage, including the marriage of Maria Branwell to Patrick Bronte, and she became Maria Bronte, mother of the Bronte sisters, mother of the greatest writing family the world has ever known. Fortunately, she didn't live to see that. She died just a year after the birth of her final child, Anne Bronte. We'll put that to one side because this is a joyous post-Christmas, pre-New Year marriage ceremony. And it's really the start of the House of Brontë. It's the start of the Bronte story where 6 children would follow in quick succession. Now, they had a very, very happy marriage. So I think that's beautiful. We can imagine the joy of this double marriage ceremony in Guiseley on this day, 1812. Now, it's especially moving to me because next year I'm getting married myself to a most wonderful woman alive, Yvette. I'm so happy at that. The luckiest man alive. So I can imagine how joyous it must have been for Patrick and Maria as well. So it's great to share a joyful story in the Bronte legend, really, in the Bronte story. So if you've enjoyed this chapter, there'll be lots more on the Brontes. Some might be a bit tragic, some might be very tragic, some might be stories of triumph, the amazing work that the Brontes did, and some will be moments of joy, like this wedding, this triple wedding in Yorkshire and Cornwall on this day. So you comment below, tell me about your own wedding if you like, or about what you think about the Patrick Bronte or Maria Bronte and the effect they had on their children. And of course you can like the video, you can subscribe, or it'd be great if you did. You can share it, tell your friends about it, and spread it online if you like. But I hope to see you again on this channel for more videos from the House of Bronte.